Hey everybody, and welcome to the video. We are continuing the Unification War and the timeline of the Emperor, as long as the entire setup for the Great Crusade to unite the shattered fragments of humanity amongst the stars. This involves creating his Legiones Astartes to conquer his way across the stars. But despite his absolute genius of vision, he is in fact but one creature, and for this Herculean task ahead of him, he needed commanders that he could rely upon. But this undertaking would take hundreds of years, if not even longer, and therefore he decided that instead of recruiting commanders, he would create them. Come along with me as we make a deep dive into the Primarch project, what was needed for it to happen and what came afterwards, as long as a bit of a setup that explains sort of the nature of Big E and his powers. So anyway, let's get into the video. In order to make his vision a reality, a united mankind whose birthright was the complete and utter dominance of the galaxy, the Emperor was well on his way. He had ordered 66th the Thunder Warriors, and while his custodians were able to pretty much curb stomp anything that they could come across, their creation was simply too costful and slow in order to be viable for galactic conquest. This problem quickly ceased to be an obstacle, however, as the Emperor had never intended for the Thunder Warriors to be a permanent solution, but rather that his next edition, the Adeptus Astartes, were supposed to be a refined and tuned product meant to last. I have in a previous video touched upon the creation of the Space Marines, so I won't go into great detail here, but there is a detail that I did not go into, and that was what came between the Thunder Warriors and the Adeptus Astartes, the Primarch project. Cards on the table here. Very little is verified about the details of this project, but I will tie together the known facts along with my own take, and of course make it as deeply rooted within the lore and the mechanics of the universe as possible. The Emperor would use his own genetic template, taking from blood and tissue samples, and throughout the years apply his intellect to create a full map of his DNA, distilling everything material about him into vast archives hidden within the Sigillite fortress. Here he would, alongside personally chosen genesmiths, data writes and medilogs, start the process of creating 20 clones of himself, meant to pave the way for humanity as they would be ready to leave the planet. However, it would not be as simple as this, as the Emperor decided to alter and shift a lot of the genetic data for each of the clones, making creations which was not only a difference in looks, but also greatly varied in trait, strengths and weaknesses, creating the basis for a unique general for each of the clones. Here, however, he will run into quite a serious problem. There is much more than just genetic alchemy and biology that makes the Emperor special. He was lacking that very special thing in order to distill it into his generals. The ingredient X, the special sauce, the soul. The soul is just as important as our bodies. Our souls, while the body can function without it, contains everything that we are. Our emotions, our drives, our needs, our willpower, and even in some cases our potential to go above the current limits of humanity. Luckily, however, the Emperor had, like any good master chef, cheated and did a little of the work another place. Okay, we're going into a tangent time here, but I promise this is essential to the Primarch project and the entire future of the galaxy, so hold on. The Emperor is an absolutely incredibly powerful psyker, no doubts about that. Not only is he capable of casually reading even the most powerful human mind and firing lightning from his fingertips and shoot fireballs out of his butthole and much more, he is powerful and dangerous, but the very thing that he is actually the best at is reading the future and acting upon these readings. Doing this, it will leave him off-world at an unknown time to a very special planet named Moloch. This was a very special place, as on this world, the supernatural was a common day occurrence, due to the fact that on this very, very special planet there was a natural occurring portal into the warp. This might be easy to skip over, but the very idea of a stable warp portal into the Immaterium is so rare that it is hard to fathom, and I don't think that besides the Eye of Terror and the Maelstrom in the current timeline, I don't think there is another gate that has been verified like this. The Emperor would travel to this place as he had learned everything he was capable about warcraft and the supernatural from the lens of the material realm, and for his ambition to bear fruit, he would need to drink directly from the source. The Emperor stepped through the ancient arch alone, his form clad in simple traveler's robes that belied the storm of his mind. The warp gate on Moloch yawned before him like a wound in reality itself, its edges flickering with colors that had no name and never would have. Olivia and the others of his band that had traveled with him waited behind, their anxious voices already fading as the veil parted. He had come for fire, and he would not leave without it. The Emperor had stepped into hell, and after everything he emerged as something else. His powers had vastly increased, but not only that, he gleaned secrets from the warp and those that reside within, secrets about the mechanics of power, fate, life and souls that he would use to lay the groundwork for the future of humanity. There is no confirmed canon of what happened within the portal, but with the way that I understand the Emperor, my take is quite simple. He lied, cheated and stole everything. In order to get anything from warp entities, you must go into a pact. You must allow yourself to be influenced as you take in what the entities offer you. Meaning that while you may be getting knowledge and power that you need, whatever gives it to you also gets to pour their will and influence onto you. With daemons and lesser entities, such pacts can be formed relatively quickly and acted upon. However, the Emperor has himself in pretty high regard, and he would not settle for any Rakshasa, Deva, Galu or Jinn. He was looking for the primordial gods of chaos. These are entities who only give mortal beings their regard if they prove themselves worthy, and I believe that the Emperor, while within the warp, undertook great labors and trials, kinda like those of Hercules, in order to prove to each of the Chaos Gods that he was worthy of their attention and the chance to acquire their gifts and their powers. What is really interesting, however, that what emerged was no mutated Chaos Spawn or no crazed champion of the Dark Gods. No, it was Big E having acquired the most badass title in any fiction, even given to him from the Dark Gods, the Anathema. 4 thrones loomed in the distance, vast beyond measure, each pulsing with the essence of a primordial power, and in turn they sensed him and laughed. "You would bargain with us, little human?" The voices were more akin to the vibration of the realm itself rather than actual sounds. "Then prove your worth, perform our task, and a measure of our fire shall be yours." Silence and acceptance was all that poured forth from the cascade of the Emperor's soul. The Blood God realm was an endless battlefield of brass and bone, where rivers of blood flowed uphill to feed the byzantinic monoliths of fire and skulls. The labor here was simple: blood for the Blood God. Time matters not within the warp, and even less so within the red realm of the Blood God. For what to a mortal would have been centuries, the Emperor fought, his sword reaping a harvest that made blackened skies flickering with blood lightning. Yet he never reveled. There was no joy in the slaughter, no offering of skulls and worship. He fought with a cold, clinical precision, conserving strength, turning the rage of his foes against them with skill and bitter detachment. At the end, the Emperor took away from Khorne the only thing that such a creature as the Blood God possessed that had any value to him: raw power and might, while he led Khorne to believe that he had gained a champion of endless war. The labor of Tzeentch, the changer of ways. He was greeted within the crystallantine labyrinth, where every path shifted and every reflection lied. Tzeentch's task was layered with schemes. Weave a conspiracy that topple an empire of my own making. Betray those who trust you and bring glorious change. The Emperor entered a vision of a vast, impossible empire. He became a trusted vizier, whispering plans within plans. He cultivated alliances, fostered rebellions, and orchestrated the fall of its tyrannical overlord, only to have others replace that overlord, to then be overturned in due time, creating a system of chains that paradoxically relied on its stability and framework. This made Tzeentch revel in glee and disgust at the same time, and to such an extent that the changer of way was completely distracted from the actual original plan, the theft of every piece of knowledge the Emperor would need for his ambition. Even when Tzeentch discovered the Emperor's misdeed, the Architect of Faith would just cackle madly, as this was the type of betrayal and behavior a would-be champion of his would always indulge in. Within the Garden of Nurgle, the Emperor himself would learn of the most true fact of the universe, that everything is in a cycle of death and rebirth. The labor was a simple one: deliver and spread their grandfather's gifts upon an untouched realm. Let life in its truest, most bountiful form flourish through decay. The Emperor walked the muck and slime that his actions rendered the world into, his perpetual flesh regenerating endlessly. Lesser beings would have caved to this process, and here for a moment the Emperor considered his vision for humanity against the flow of cosmic entropy that he came upon. But the truth only made him more stalwart. From suffering comes resilience. Nurgle beamed with parental pride and bestowed upon the Emperor the secrets of resilience and the binding of the power of life and death, believing that the Emperor had accepted the entropic nature of the galaxy. But the Emperor instead saw that this very nature would have humanity rise to the top, as no one could endure as much as mankind, and therefore none would ever rival humanity. The labor of Slaanesh, the newborn Dark Prince, was dark and demeaning, as among all of the gods, Slaanesh understood what kind of man they were facing, but not what power he truly possessed. The labor was to enter court of the Dark Prince, entertain them and give them a taste of something they had never experienced. The Emperor took upon himself the guise of a figure of impossible grace, and within the eternal reveling court of the Dark Prince, he would compose symphonies that blended agony and ecstasy, crafting dances that transcended flesh, and wove tapestries of emotion drawn from the collective dreams of humanity. Daemons and pleasure cultists wept and laughed and shattered from this intensity. Slaanesh shivered in delight upon the throne of vices, but was always left unsatisfied at the very last moment. The Emperor offered peaks of sensation, but never surrendered to them, never took any pride or affirmation in his own excellence, and unlike any before the Dark Prince, he remained sovereign of his own soul. This drove Slaanesh into a frenzy, and the fledgling prince in their anger tried to consume the Emperor. However, this was the event that the Emperor had waited for, as he had been baiting the Dark God, seeing them as no other thing than another war predator. Through all of his symphonies, dances and emotions, he had wrought an intricate spell that would deliver not a tribute as the Dark Prince wished for. Darkness engulfed the golden figure, and the Prince of Pleasure purred, believing another soul had been ensnared by its desire until the trick itself was revealed. The spell was that of reflection, looping actions taken back upon the aggressor, tricking the Dark Prince into a spiral of self-feeding and self-gorging upon its very own essence, meaning that if Slaanesh were to recover, they would have to taste something that they had never done before: restraint. The Emperor proclaimed before the four thrones, "I have labored, and now I claim what is owed." With a single titanic act of will, he bound the gift of power to himself, weaving them onto his own immortal soul, without any oath of fealty or chains of corruption attached. The ruinous power howled as they realized the true deception, and they named him the Anathema. This word used by the ruinous power should be taken very heavily, as it means to be the opposite, to be repelled by, or to be an abomination in the eyes of those using the word, meaning that Big E in the eyes of the gods had become their most dangerous opponent, their greatest danger, their anathema. I believe that in the warp there was a moment of genuine danger to the Emperor, where he would gaze upon the immaterium, only protected momentarily by his vast psychic might. Oh, the gods of chaos must have reveled in this moment, leaving themselves open in their hubris, as they would never consider a mere man to be any sort of obstacle to them. So he played them, coming to understand their natures, what it represented, and then the Emperor would reforge himself. He would take upon himself aspects and symbols that rendered their influence upon him meaningless, that he would make his being in the warp out of discipline. He forged himself in stoicism. He would revel in altruism and seek solace in stability. These were not gods to him. They were but dangers and obstacles, just another puzzle to overcome. This allowed him to take what he needed, leaving behind anything else that they would tempt him with. But this maneuver did have a weakness. It made him a target. This will become relevant later. Morlock was left behind, and now he had what he needed to finish the Primarch project. The ability to conjure, bargain, bind and fuse 20 pure and wholesome warp entities of magnificent power into the bodies of his sons, making beings that were wholly unique to the galaxy, somebody that he could rely upon for what comes next. With the fire of the gods in his hands and within him, the Emperor could finally move on to the ending phase of the Primarch project. Their bodies have been wrought through gene alchemy and the strange sciences hidden within the city-like fortresses beneath the palace, and their infant bodies, deep within their DNA, possess the ability to overcome. Now comes the most important part of the process. The conjuring and the tailoring of the souls and minds for each of these would-be demigods. The exact method has not been revealed to us as the readers of the lore, but my take is that the Emperor came to understand that the basis of a human soul would be too brittle to be trusted with this level of responsibility and power, but luckily his new level of warpcraft have him become leagues above what would be possible before. Using this new understanding of both universes, I believe that the Emperor summoned, bargained and haggled 20 benevolent entities at the very least to be infused within these bodies, and they would be of aspects associated with humanity's highest aspirations: courage, duty, justice, transcendence and much more. Each binding fused the entity's essence within the development Primarch infant, granting superhuman potential while anchoring the soul against the warp's predations. However, making sure that the warp entity would melt together with the human soul, meaning that this was no mere possession, this was the creation of something new. The first Primarch was named Lion L. Johnson, and within him was bound an ancient spirit born from mankind's primal fear of the dark and the resolve to stand vigil against it. The second Primarch, however, I can't tell you anything about, as it has been wiped from the history. However, The third Primarch, Fulgrim, was infused with the spirit of the radiant ideal, a being of perfect beauty, harmony, and artistic transcendence. She was distilled longing of humanity for grace and elevation above the crude. However, the fourth Primarch was combined with the god of unyielding endurance through suffering, creating a being who would overcome anything at any cost. Jagatai Khan, the fifth son of the Emperor, bore within him the spirit of independence and the need to roam free, while Leman Russ, the sixth Primarch, were combined with the demigod of loyalty, hearth, and the hunt, creating a true protector against the unnatural. The seventh Rogel Dawn was melded perfectly with the god of defiance and willpower, creating a beacon of humanity's destiny to inhabit the stars. The eighth was infused with the twin spirits of justice and vengeance, creating the being known as Conrad Curse, humanity's judge. The ninth was something quite special, as one could believe that even the fate had a hand in this creation, and that was the angel Sanguinius, infused with the embodiment of nobility, selflessness, and hope. While the 10th one, the Grimferous Manus, held the spirit of resolve, being able to stand against anything that any world or universe would ever throw against humanity. Then we have another Primarch, the 11th one. This one has also been wiped out, so that is pure speculation. The 12th Primarch, Angron, was the bearer of the spirit of righteousness and rebellion. He, if not for his faith, would have become the purest, the brightest amongst all of his brothers, and I'm gonna make an entire video about that because I love Angron and not as the rage monster that he would become. Clad in blue and gold, the 13th Primarch, Robuta Gilliman, he would carry within him the soul of aspiration and logic, seeing the truth of the world and carrying its burdens with greatness. Mortarion, the 14th Primarch, carried the dark yet noble spirit of refusal to give up, to give in, to give ground, to give anything up, be it life or death. Like with Sanguinius, the 15th Primarch was created very, very special, and that was Magnus. He was given the soul might equal to the Emperor himself, being the center point of many fates of the universe as he would become the Sorcerer King. Within him lay the great spirit of curiosity and I believe also quite a bit of innocence. Horus Lupercal, the 16th, was created and given the rare spirit of the sovereign light. He carried within him the same drive to unify, just like his father, and to be a leader and a shepherd for those within his reach. While Lorgar became the demigod of inspiration, seeing the universe not for what it was, but what it could and should be, walking the world of meaning rather than the world of fact. The 18th was the dragon, Vulcan himself, the bearer of compassion and self-sacrifice, while the 19th was the Raven Lord Corvus Corax, the dark demigod of deliverance. And finally was the most unique one of all of the creations, the 20th Primarchs, the twin Alpharius and Omegon, being the twin-souled demigod of deception and truth in a forever dance. Depending on what part of the lore that one subscribes to, the Emperor created these generals of his alone as one of his most cared-for secrets, and in that version what is about to happen is at the hands of the dark gods, while in another version he had others around him for this project, and in that version what is about to happen is at the hands of a character called Erda, the female donor for the Primarchs. No matter which one you like, the unthinkable happened. The Primarchs in their protected gene capsules were swallowed up in a terrible warp portal as but for a moment the indomitable defenses of the palace failed and the sons of the Emperor were scattered throughout the entire galaxy, having them each land on a planet in accordance with what the fates and the dark gods would have in store for them. And we shall touch upon that later, So for now, thank you so much for watching, and we're not leaving the Unification War behind just yet, as I have found something truly cool that I want to share with you. But anyways, I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!